be only one podcast, and may it be the Princes of the Universe. Hi folks, I'm Matt, and with me is not Bruce. Still, no guest. I can't get a hold of this dude. Anyway, I know I promised you a Rise of the Skywalker review, and that's probably why Bruce didn't show up, because he doesn't want to talk about the movie. So instead, I'm going to go through my second topic, which makes this podcast half the time. It'll be about Bob Igor's autobiography. Now, there was a lot said earlier last year about this biography when it came out, about the things he said surrounding George Lucas. I'm going to address those, but on top of it, I read the entire biography on my own and I'm going to give you a full review of this book, not just some of the chapters or pages dealing with George Lucas. So first off, it starts off with a prelude. He is in Shanghai opening up the new Disney World there, and he talks about how it was one of the greatest days of his life, but that was also the day that a child got dragged off by a crocodile or alligator on the premises of Disney World and died. And it also became one of his saddest days of his life. So both happy and sad at the same time. It was an interesting way to write a prelude and an interesting story. Now, I haven't given my opinion much of Bob Igor on any of my videos in the past couple of years. At first I thought, you know what, I think he's not a micromanager. And I think I'm right about that. I still think I'm right about that. Sure, does he micromanage the movies? Possibly. He goes in there just like George Lucas did and says, add this, take away this, let's do this, let's reformat this. And that's just what he does. And now reading this book, I think I have a better idea of him. Now, in the book, in the opening chapter, he talks about the important keys to leadership. And this is really good stuff, actually, when you think about it. I agree with a lot of things he said here. Leaders must have optimism. That is true. No one likes a pessimist. Optimism means you're looking at the brighter side of things, and we should always be have optimism in our job, in our career, in our personal life. I always do. This is something I live by. The other one is courage. Courage, he said, can be defined on a few things. Standing up for the right thing, doing the right thing. That is correct, but you need to make sure you are wise enough to understand what you are standing up for. Some things that people find courageous are not. I wish he would have kind of expounded on that in the chapter, but he didn't. But still, courage, yeah, of course you got to have courage. Don't be afraid to speak your mind. The next one he said was focus, and I also agree with this one as well. You've got to be focused. That's one of the things I try to work on in my personal life or career. Sometimes we have so many balls we're trying to balance. It's hard to stay focused on one and get it done. So focus is a big deal for me. The next one is decisionness, which seems like the same thing, but the ability to make a decision. I pride myself in able to do this. I do not stand there and look and wait and see. I kind of attribute this to board games. A lot of the times, board games force you to make decisions, sometimes quick, sometimes on the spot. You don't want to sit there forever. It's called analysis paralysis if you do. So decisionness is something that I think I also agree with him is very important. The next one he said is curiosity. Curiosity, of course, you got to be curious about new technologies, new things, new everything. I have some curiosity, but I'll be honest, that's another one that I would probably need to work on out of all of these. The next one is fairness. Of course, treating people fairly, and he said he does that in every way, shape, fashion, and form. But yeah, okay, I do that too. I agree. I love fairness. The next one he says thoughtfulness, being thoughtful, mindful of others, thinking about the situation, how it may impact others. I am very thoughtful about that. I always am trying to double guess myself when I'm writing email at my work, and I'm like, could this be considered to be angry? Or could this be taken as me not wanting to help them out? Because I don't want it to be construed as that. So I do agree that thoughtfulness is part of a leader. And then lastly, and this is the most important one too, is integrity. You got to have that integrity. Now, I know there's a lot of those Disney hater Star Wars fans like, Igor, integrity? Are you kidding me? Well, this is his standards. This is what he put himself up to. And we'll get to that, what he said about George Lucas in a minute. So chapter 1 starts off with, the beginning, how he started up through the business. His uncle got him a job at the local ABC affiliate and a station in New York, which is where he was from, as a producer. It was just a small town thing, but his uncle owned the station, so he was doing that. That's kind of how he jumped into it. And you could say, he didn't start at the bottom. Well, you know what? I understand how family can help you up, and you always give family a helping hand. It wasn't like they handed him a bag of money. He had to do his job there. But he did start off as a little producer at a local ABC affiliate station. And that's where he jumped on into the big world of ABC in New York later on, where, he just spiffed up his resume and it got accepted. And he did a lot of wonderful things there at ABC New York. One of the things he said was he worked on Frank Sinatra's, I can't remember what year it was, 1970 something, TV special. And he learned how to, how the cameras move, how to entertain a crowd, what's important to that crowd. And he said Frank Sinatra even gave him a lighter and thanked him. And he was like, cool. He said, I still have that lighter today. That's really neat. You got to meet Frank Sinatra. He talks about working on ABC's Worldwide of Sports and how fun that was and how they used to spend the big money going to wild places all around the world, going in big hotels, traveling in limos, eating the finest food. So, yeah, in a way, he got a big taste of what it was like to be super rich. Even though he may not have been, he may have been a mediocre salary, medium salary, not minimum wage. He was obviously making good enough to live up in New York, working at ABC affiliate as a producer. But he was living the fine life very early on in his career. Now, what would that do to a person? Well, I don't know. You can say, did he earn it or not? Again, you have to go back to his uncle giving him the job. But he did have to earn that. So in a way, yeah, I can see where he earned this spot, even though he got to live in the lap of luxury way sooner than a lot of people, I believe. My company allows me to travel from time to time. I have traveled all around the U.S., not around the world. I have not stayed at the finest restaurants. I've not eaten the finest food. I have eaten delicious food, and I have stayed at decent restaurants. And, I'm glad for my minor experience, but it kind of matches my minor life, His is a little bit upper level, and there's nothing wrong with that. He then talks about in Chapter 2 how he worked for ABC Sports, but they were bought by a small channel, I guess a small local channel, and they cut out all their travel and kind of, construed the budget because, hey, we were spending way too much money than what we actually had. And he talks about, being under small town management and what he learned there. He worked on the '88 Olympics, which is really interesting. The last time it was on ABC before it switched over to NBC. And then he became, after that happened, after the '88 Olympics, because they knew they were losing the rights to the Olympics, supposedly he did a great '88 Olympics. I remember watching those as a kid. I don't remember much about them, but he told a story with each one of the characters, and it became more interesting when you had the story of the person, who they were, and instead of just an athlete trying to get a gold medal. And he said from there he became the head of ABC Entertainment, and he had to move off to L.A. Now, Bob Igor was previously married before his current wife. This led to their divorce later on. He explains that she was a New York girl, and business just kept pulling to L.A. He did miss New York, but he kept having to, stay in L.A. for various reasons, and that just led to their eventual departure. But anyway, Chapter 3 talks about some of the TV shows that he worked on for ABC. And here, writing for Hollywood, kind of found out, he talked about his hits and misses, most of his hits. He only talked about one miss, even though there could be more, but I didn't take the time to look into them. But Doogie Howser was an idea that he worked on, helped develop, and helped get into a show. I never watched as a kid, but NYPD Blue, he said he wanted something a little bit more darker for television, something he had never seen before, and that worked. He said he was the one that let Twin Peaks happen because he was interested in Laura Palmer, and he didn't get all the odd stuff that was going on in that TV. He said, well, this is different. Let's try it. And they got praise for being different. But when the Laurie Palmer story wasn't wrapping up, and of course the director didn't want to do that story, it kind of got a little hectic in season 2, and they ended up canceling it because there were no viewers. He still says he's glad he did it, and of course, critic-wise, they were just enthralled by it. But he didn't get it when he saw the first screening. But he said, you know what? I'm going to let this guy's vision go on TV. We'll give him a shot. We'll try anything. And then that's when he jumps into Cop Rock. Cop Rock was, and this is a real thing, it went one season. It was a musical, TV series musical of cops. And they would break out into song during their adventures in these episodes. I'm not making this up. Look up Cop Rock on YouTube. I did too. I couldn't remember Cop Rock. And he said, well, that's different too. Because he was thinking, well, Twin Peaks got a lot of critics up in, arms, and they really loved it. maybe they'll love cop rock because people love musicals and people love cop shows. No, those two did not go well together. That series bombed, and he says, yeah, we should have thought about that a little bit better. So he is, honest enough to talk about some of his failures as well. Now, the chapter ends with Disney buying out ABC and how he was kind of panicked and he was ready to quit and leave and walk away. And at the last minute, they kept him on and said, "No, Bob, we're gonna use you for things." He talks about how Michael Eisner, meeting him, getting to know him, what that was going on. Kind of skips over Jeffrey Katzenberg. Doesn't really talk about Jeffrey Katzenberg that much. I don't know why. But he talks about how Mike Eisner had heart surgery and, how he think that led to some of his, he said he was a good guy, had a lot to micromanage, but unfortunately the heart surgery kind of took it out of him and he was kind of weaker. And he didn't realize how big ABC was, meaning it was also radio, magazines, and other things too. It wasn't just TV. And so it's a little too much maybe for him to pull off. In chapter 5, he talks about how ABC is falling from the rankings. As you know, the ratings for ABC as time went on were getting lower and lower, and they were trying to get new hits. This is when CBS was really knocking it out of the park with tons of things going on. And so to be honest, even though Iger doesn't really point to it, but he's in charge of ABC while it is failing. Now he talks about, his let me see, what was it? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? That was a big one. And he said that was the only hit they had. So he was the one that authorized it to go 5 nights a week, which eventually burned viewers out on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, of course. But he said he didn't have a choice. Now, to me, this is a guy who is failing. He is failing at ABC Entertainment. He's coming up with zeros and coming up with misses. I'm not here to take down Bob Iger, but I'm just here to say that even though he doesn't portray it as such, it seems like he is failing on every level. Since he was in charge of ABC during this time, they kept falling from the ratings. Remember, he took over and ratings kind of went down. Now, he also talks about how Eisner was on and off about Bob Iger. Some days he'd love him. Some days he'd, not talk to him or just kind of not shake his head and walk away. Again, he doesn't paint Eisner in the best picture, but he doesn't paint him in the worst either. He paints him as, this is just one of his moves, or this is just how he was. So I'm assuming he knew Eisner may read this. He didn't want to hurt his feelings. I can see that. But he did talk about some of the things that frustrated him about Michael Eisner. Now, Michael Eisner hates to be called Mike. I think the first time he called him Mike, and someone looked at him and said, you need to address him as Michael. He hates Mike. So he calls him Michael Eisner. I thought that was pretty funny. Chapter 6 talks about how Eisner came to Disney in 1984. The first 10 years, and he's right about this. When Eisner took over as CEO, remember he's just at ABC right now. When he takes over as CEO of Disney, from 84 to 94, he was on fire. All the movies, all the decisions he made, and then he said the next 10 years, 94 to 2004, were mediocre. Not as big hits, of course. That's when the second wave of Disney animated movies are coming in. They're not doing as good. Things are going down. Toy Story had come out by then, by Disney / Pixar in '95, but it was kind of slipping away because he wasn't. Anyway, he wasn't really on top of that deal. He and Pixar were fighting, Disney and Pixar, and that's because of Michael Eisner. And he puts the blame squarely on Michael Eisner there, or as I'm going to call him, Mike. Just kidding. He talks about how ESPN was at its height back then because everyone was loving sports and they were signing big contracts. Well, right now, ESPN is a black hole. It's sucking all money out from Disney right now. It's a really bad deal. If you look at their numbers, how they're doing in TV, they're hurting because ESPN is hurting. Of course, you've heard about, if you keep up with ESPN news or, behind the scenes news, they've been slashing commentators and broadcasters left and right to save money because they're really hurting. The days of, big business, big sports are kind of way gone now. He talks about raising Disney World tickets, which is now an annual thing. They always raise the tickets a couple of bucks every year, and it's I do have a problem with that, and so do a lot of travel agents. They said Disney World is now becoming a place for the rich, or if you're, middle income, you're going to save up all your money and, just for that one trip every couple of years because you really can afford it, but it's only for the rich now. It's getting to be that way, in fact. He talks about how he was increasing sales on Disney World, getting more hotels up, which, of course, that's good. That's regular business. I don't fault him for that. He talks about how ABC's ratings were in the tank at this point. I mean, again, he's in charge of it. So he's not making excuses. He's not saying it's all his fault either. He's just saying what was going on there. And one of his old, at this point, one of his old, mentors was forced into retirement. And then he talks about how for Disney, Pirates of the Caribbean was their first big hit, coming back. Disney wasn't the box office name as it was back in the 90s anymore, and it took to the mid-2000s or early 2000s to get to the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, which was their first smash breakout hit. And from there, they started building out. If you remember, they did Haunted Mansion by Eddie Murphy. They're trying to get other rides going, but that wasn't the deal. Just Pirates of the Caribbean was. But that was Disney's first box office smash ever since some of the animated movies, and that's what would begin their dominance over the box office like you see today. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Disney, I think, took in like 60% or higher of the box office receipts for all Disney movies. I mean, that's really good for a company if they're just competing against themselves, which seems to be the case these days. And I'm not opposed to Disney coming out with great movies. I do not like what they're doing with movie theaters right now. If you don't know, you need to check that out. That's just a whole nother conversation to have. But in Chapter 7, he talks about the fallout with Steve Jobs and Pixar. Pixar was not happy with Disney. Disney wanted wanted to just rake Pixar over the coals, and Steve Jobs was not happy, and he just walked away. And that attitude toward Disney was sour for the longest. And it talks about him interviewing to be CEO after Michael Eisner had stepped down, and that they were originally considering Meg Whitman of eBay. That was kind of interesting. But anyway, he eventually takes over with Disney, and he reaches out to Steve Jobs to kind of mend those fences. And Steve Jobs at first doesn't think, he said, "You're just another Disney suit. I'm not interested in you." But then he eventually became friends with Steve Jobs and got him to sell Pixar. Now, no matter what you say about Bob Iger, he is obviously good at befriending people. I guess he has some appeal of honesty about him, and he gets people to trust him, man. People trust him. Steve Jobs said when he asked Steve Jobs if he'd be interested in selling Pixar, he paused and, yeah, maybe. And then, of course, he gave Steve Jobs a majority share as a shareholder of Disney, and he was on the board and everything. So it made Steve Jobs happy. It added a big, big, big heavyweight name, Pixar, to Disney, which would go on to, it's still making big movies. That Pixar movie comes out, you're going to bring your kids to go see it. So, love or hate Bob Iger, you got to admit that was a big job, especially when the rift was so torn apart at this point that Steve Jobs wanted nothing to do with them. Now, going from there to Chapter 9, I'm kind of blowing through this, but, hey, read the book. If you want to get more information about this, read the book. But Chapter 9 is talking about the buying Pixar, how it was the first big acquisition to save Disney Animation, which was kind of floundering at the time. And Pixar was way more popular. I think they bought it for like $7.4 billion and whatnot. And so it was a big deal. He said, it saved Disney from going into oblivion, which it could be true. If they don't buy Pixar, I think Disney's still around, but Disney's not the big name as they are today, because Pixar gave them a lot of more money and more income coming in to make more purchases later on. And it would also show other people that, hey, you can trust your legacy with us. Now, earlier, I think he had mentioned this, but I don't see it anywhere. But he had mentioned how Jim Henson had talked to Michael Eisner about keeping his creations alive. And, if he was going to be dead and gone, he didn't want, the Muppets to disappear, which I don't think they would have. But he gave them over to Disney. And so that's why Disney owns the Muppets. And that's the idea of a lot of people like, man, I want my legacy to continue on. Disney looks like they're forever. Let me give it to them. And you think, why would you give it to them. They're already big. Well, that's the reason, because they're going to be around for a long, long time. Imagine if you had created a great character and you wanted them to continue. You didn't want them to fade away and 100 years from now no one know about them. You wanted them to always be in people's minds years later. And it's a good way to put them in a time capsule called Disney, and they'll stay alive forever in that fact. So I can see people like Jim Henson, Steve Jobs wanting their creations to be a part, even though Steve Jobs, Pixar wasn't his creation. He had bought it and turned it into what it became. So, well, essentially, I guess he created Pixar in a way. He didn't invent Pixar, but he created it into the massive, talented organization that it was when Disney bought it. But anyway, so that's basically Chapter 9. Chapter 10, it's funny, he talks about how Steve Jobs, he was, this is back when the Marvel movies were slightly rolling out, and Steve Jobs was not afraid to share his opinion. Steve Jobs hated Iron Man 2. He thought it was terrible. He said, I just saw Iron Man 2 and I'm like, kid, it sucked. That's what he told Bob Igor. But I was like, oh, okay. You know, Bob Igor would sit there and tweak little movies and give little notes and see what it was. Steve Jobs was kind of a snob too, because he didn't like some of the Disney's low-end hotels. He went to one of the, low-end hotels for, middle-income families, and he thought it was cheap. Everything was. He said, well, Steve, those are our low-income ones, for families who can't afford the nice stuff. He went, I don't know why they'd want this. This is crap. So in a way, he was a little bit of a prima donna, but you kind of knew that, I guess, if you knew anything or read anything about Steve Jobs. I mean, smart man, don't get me wrong, but yeah. Jobs was actually the reason, one of the big instigators in helping him acquire Marvel. Of course, the Disney Marvel buyout was a big one. That was $4 billion. And so, when they bought Marvel to begin with, that was another big one. And then they started making these, and that's when they thought about the MCU, and it was brilliant. I mean, they changed the way movie studios look at movies now, right? Everything has to connect. Everyone wants their own franchise, like Disney made their own franchise. So they actually started a big trend there. So I got to give them my hats off to them again like that. And then he, of course, talks about how the big success of Black Panther was, and how he kind of, it is kind of weird because he doesn't give that much. He gives credit to the director, but he says they had to change a lot of stuff, and he's almost like he's patting himself on the back, like, yeah, I'm the reason Black Panther was a success. Folks, you know what I think of Black Panther. I think it's a train wreck. It's a train wreck. The CGI is horrible in there. The blue screens are unbelievably bad. I mean, it is really a terribly looking film. I mean, story-wise, I don't think it's that strong either. Acting-wise, it's fine. But visually, it is a nightmare. It is a mess. It is garbage. Look at it again, please. I was told that Black Panther was as good as Avengers. I couldn't wait to see it. I was really excited. My wife was really excited. And we rented it because we didn't miss it in theaters. They were like, oh, you made a big mistake. You should have seen Black Panther in theaters. I'm like, man, yeah, we should have probably. And then we watch it. My wife left. Halfway through it, she was bored. The storyline was going nowhere. And visually, I was just sitting there going, I want to vomit. This is horrible. Now, I was really thinking, is something wrong with my TV? Obviously, the special effects can't be that bad, but it wasn't a good movie. Now, Chapter 11, of course, is the big chapter. That's the George Lucas chapter that everyone keeps talking about. But what you may or may not know is George Lucas was interested in selling Lucasfilm, but he wanted it. He wanted to sell it. He wanted the Pixar deal. He wanted to sell it for $7.4 billion. That's what he wanted, because he didn't. If he sold less than Pixar, then that would mean that Lucasfilm is inferior to Pixar. And to be honest, Iger said, he said it was only worth $3.5 billion. But then when they sent that offer to Lucasfilm, George Lucas was pissed. He said, no, we're better than Marvel. At least I need to get what Marvel gets. Now, when I heard about the $4 billion buyout, I thought, oh, man, they underpaid for that. I thought it was a steal, too. But Bob Iger breaks it down and says, well, they had no movies coming out, which is true. They had no movies coming out, which is a big part of their income, which would have been. They had some merchandise, some books, he says some TV series. He said, but really there wasn't much there, and how they generated sales is what they went by. Now, if he'd have been cranking out movies left and right, and they could have seen how relevant Star Wars was in the market, they probably would have paid more. But if you think about it, toys were kind of slow, or they weren't as slow as they are now, but they were still slowing down since there were no movies going around keeping them around. And just due to all the lack of developing projects by Lucasfilm, it didn't make sense to offer George more than $3.5 billion. But he knew George wasn't going to take less than Marvel, because he felt that they were bigger than Marvel. George's ego comes into play here. If you I don't know if anyone's heard me talk about this, but George Lucas did have an ego, of course. He did have an ego. It bruised his ego. He wanted to make sure he was at least better than Marvel. And they actually gave him $4.05 billion just to show it was a little bit more than Marvel, even though Iger says, hey, we overpaid for this sucker, George. I'm doing it for you. But Lucas thought it was well worth it. He thought it was giving away for a steal. But remember, again, Lucas wanted to get rid of Lucasfilm. He didn't want to keep them around. So that was all him. By the way, he said George Lucas wanted to retain control without being an employee or owner, and he's like, absolutely not. And I agree with Iger there. I actually agree with him. A lot of people are like, oh, I can't believe he would screw George like he did. Dude, I bought it. I would be interested in George's thoughts, but I own it now, so I get to do what I want to do. It was funny that George didn't want any of the responsibility, but he wanted all of the control. He didn't want the bad parts. He just wanted the good parts where he could talk and do what he wanted to do. And in this scenario, I think Lucas may be the bad guy here. But anyway, Disney walked away at first when he was insisting upon that. Lucas walked away during their second meeting, so this didn't really work out very well between the two because they were both arguing about whether he could retain control or not. And I never knew this was a big deal or not because this was never mentioned in the old Bloomberg report. If you remember the old Bloomberg article where Bob Igor kind of talks about how they came about buying Lucasfilm. So the book is a little bit more detailed. Anyway, they did buy Lucas's scripts, but he said he made it clear to them that they didn't have to use them. And I'll be honest, that was in the Bloomberg report too. That was in the Bloomberg report. I want to say I talked about that on a podcast a long time ago, but I have no recollection of which podcast that could be, so I'm not going to say it. But I remember reading about that and thinking, look at that. They bought those scripts from him, and they with the express authority, because this is back when that Bloomberg article came out, like a few months after they bought Lucasfilm. And he's saying, yeah, we got George's scripts. We don't necessarily have to use them. And I knew. I was like, they're not going to use the scripts. They're not going to use them. And so George shouldn't have either. So I actually believe Iger. I'm going to side with Iger here. I know this is kind of outrageous. You're like, whoa, Matt. Whoa. You don't like the new canon. No, I don't. But I believe Iger because he said the same thing in that Bloomberg report years ago, before the movies even came out. You didn't need to read. When everyone was just going crazy over this story, when his autobiography came out, I was like, yeah, and you guys didn't know that? It was already out there. But he said Iger did say he was surprised by Kathleen Kennedy being. George insisted on getting his replacement to run Lucasfilm, and Bob Iger allowed him. He said he was kind of shocked it was Kathleen Kennedy. He doesn't explain much more after that, but he knew that she was a long-term producer with George Lucas. Oh, well, she and her husband were long-term producers. And if you see, Kathleen Kennedy's name is on a lot of movies. I mean, Willow, for one. She helped with George Lucas on Willow. But George thought that she would follow his vision. And so that's why he picked her. Because he thought, well, this one will do what I say. And Kathleen nodded her head and smiled and did the exact opposite, right? So, I mean, for Kathleen Kennedy, yeah, okay, two-faced. You can say that. That's fine. I'll agree with that. I think Iger was on the up and up, to be honest. Now, I'll be honest, Iger's book reads like an apology to George Lucas because he knows George was angry when his scripts weren't being used. So, and this is not, everyone's reported this too, but George hated episode 7. Of course, he had a contract where he couldn't talk about, he was obligated not to talk bad about the films, contractually obligated. George Lucas may not talk about the sequels bad. I wonder if that's forever. But that's going to be wild to think about because I bet George doesn't like any of the sequels, but that's why he can't talk bad about them. He reminded George Lucas that on the red carpet back then when the movie came out, but George hated episode 7. He just thought it was garbage. And, of course, that's been reported several times, so I'm not going to go much into that. But he said by May 2015 they were going to get their money back on their investment or sooner. And, yeah, I think they did. I mean, they bought this, late 2012? In my opinion, once that movie came out, they made back their investment plus more, So that $4.05 billion they've already made up, and they made tons of money since then, which kind of leads George Lucas saying, yeah, I told you, that's why I wanted $7.4 billion. I wonder if George would have held out for 7.4 if they would have folded. They folded for half a billion. I don't know if they would have. Maybe they would have walked away, but they obviously there's someone who said, "Hey, we can make a ton of money if we make movies." Obviously, someone knew that. I don't know about that. So anyway, but he talks about how George called him after the interview with Charlie Rose, where he called Disney white slavers. He said he just kind of misspoke. But the thing was, George was bitter. He was bitter. He didn't like how he looked on the interview. And when that came out, everyone, boo. And so he apologized for that. But that was interesting. Now, that's a big chapter to read on. If you just want to read the George Lucas saga, then definitely tune in to chapter 11, of course. And then, yeah, you can get this book at the library, by the way. You don't have to buy it. Go to your library. The library can get one for you if they don't have one already. That's what I did. I rented from the library. Chapter 12, he tries to, get this, Iger tried to buy Twitter, but backed out last minute. I mean, Jack Dorsey was okay selling Twitter to Disney. Can you imagine that? Twitter would be Disney. But Iger backed out of it because he just didn't know, he didn't like how things were going on Twitter and social media, and he decided to back out of the deal. Iger also considered running for president, as everyone knows. He said the Democrats wouldn't be likely to elect a successful businessman. He kind of hints at how crazy Democrats are becoming these days. And it's funny because that's the same reason Jamie Dimon, the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, is not running for president either, because, hey, these Democrats be crazy now, the new type. And I want old school Democrats. And I think Bob Iger is part of that old school Democratic thinking. Either way, though, he talks about Rupert and about Fox, and about there was a potential deal there, and it was bigger than Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars combined. He says everyone thinks, oh, it's the Lucasfilm acquisition. That was their biggest one, but he says it's the Fox acquisition, and I agree. The Fox acquisition is obviously the biggest one that he had going on here. So that is true. In Chapter 13, he talks about firing Roseanne from her TV show. He says he has no regrets. But this is also a man who believes in second chances, he said, and forgiving and having thoughtfulness to the matter. And so that kind of goes against what he said earlier in the chapter. It really does. But he says he had no regrets for what she said and what she did. Now, is Roseanne stupid? Yes, she's stupid. He should have made her apologize, like they make a bunch of stars apologize. But like I said, it's a double. It's a double standard. And to be honest, Bob Iger's showing it right there, even though he's saying no, that's the thing. But you think about it, what he did to Catherine Powell, the person who was in charge of the Disney parks, fired her when Star Wars Galaxy's Edge went by. And and Ryan Johnson, who trolls fans forever, that guy doesn't get any hate. That guy doesn't. I mean, they're still promoting him, or they were for the longest. That just doesn't jive with me. But he's trying to do his white knighting in Chapter 13. So it doesn't make him look so great. But Chapter 14, talking about how they secretly beat Comcast for a bid on Fox. They kind of snuck in under the radar, made a last-minute bid. There's a big fight. I remember when this was going on, because I was actually cheering for Comcast because I didn't want Fox to go to Disney, because that was just more power to Disney. But Comcast is a terrible company. Why would I ever root for Comcast, But Comcast backed up a lot of money, and then Disney came in, secretly beat their bid, and Comcast was shocked because they didn't know that Disney had made a bid. They'd been, there's a lot of, he was talking about corporate spying going on, and how they had to go travel incognito under different names, grab a different flight, get off the company jet, and travel different ways to get to certain places. It was really interesting. But it ends on Disney Plus. He talks about how Disney Plus, he had to leave the Apple board, the board on Apple, because they were opening up a competition to Disney Plus. And he's hoping Disney Plus is going to be the cherry on top of everything he's done, so that he will step down. And you've heard about Bob Iger retiring a couple of times here and there. Well, this time I truly believe will be his retirement now. I think he'll be done after this. But he believes Disney Plus is his last big ship. They believe they have a lot riding on Disney Plus. A lot riding. And we'll see after the first year what Disney Plus does. Because to be honest, I got a free subscription to Disney Plus. That's why I have Disney Plus. Okay? Without my free subscription, I don't have Disney Plus. In fact, I'm almost done watching all of my shows. I got one more show I want to watch on Disney Plus. After that, I'm pretty much done. I don't want to look at anything else. So that's just me. But anyway, he talks about how Disney Plus could be the next big, greatest thing. That's going to be his last great accomplishment before he eventually retires in the next year or so. He's going to be retiring soon. I can't remember. I didn't write it down here. Anyway, the appendix even has some interesting stuff. He gives words of advice. I guess it's stuff that he wanted to give words of advice, wise words. He couldn't figure out a way to put it in the book, so he just made a appendix full of wise words. And one thing that he does say in the book a lot is innovate or die. You've got to innovate or die. Change the way you do things, get better. And I agree with that. I think innovate or die is a great motto to have. The next one is give second chances for mistakes. Ha ha ha. You did not for Roseanne. You did not for Catherine Powell. So that's hypocritical. He said admit that you don't know something. I don't know if I've heard him say I don't know, but I do believe that. It's better to say I don't know than pretend to know something. You pretend to know something, people can spot fakeness a mile away, and they'll see right through it. So if you don't know the answer, just say I don't know. And it's not about being indispensable. He said it's not about being indispensable. Training others to fill your shoes. Training others. Don't get nervous. You're training others to fill your spot because hey, there may be bigger and better things. If you're thinking, man, I'm training you to do my job, what's going to happen to me? Well, obviously you don't have much of you don't have much faith in yourself. And he said no one follows a pessimist, which is also true. People are saying the sky is falling. No one follows them. And he said a little respect goes a long way in negotiating. Now, obviously, he is the master negotiator, right? I've already talked about Pixar, Marvel, Fox, Disney, Lucasfilm. He's made tons. He is the master of negotiating, Bob Iger. I bet, if anyone here, no matter if you hate Bob Iger, if you met him, you'd walk away going, well, he wasn't so bad because of all the deals he has made. You think about it. Rupert Murdoch is not a Democrat, okay? Why would he give to a Democrat? Why would he give someone Bob Iger? Why would he let the rich get richer? That's basically his nemesis. No, because Bob Iger treats him with respect. There's just so many things that Bob Iger is. I mean, there's a lot of things Bob Iger is, but one thing, he's obviously good at negotiating. That you can't argue that. And then finally he says, you have to do the homework, you have to be prepared. Well, obviously Bob Iger did the homework. Obviously he was prepared to do all the things he's done at Disney. And to be honest, love him or hate him, he's done great things for Disney, folks. You can keep hating on Disney, but Disney keeps winning. And that is because of Bob Iger, I'll be honest. Is Bob Iger perfect? No. Do I like Bob Iger? I don't know. I respect some of the things he can do, but I don't know if he's that great a guy. And that's not really on how he treated George Lucas. Like I said, I think he's in the right and Lucas is in the wrong there, which is going to be a very unpopular opinion, I'm sure, once this podcast gets out. But, yeah, again, I think he's okay. He's not the greatest guy in the world. I don't believe, Oprah's like promoting him. She said, if you were president, I go door to door, knocking on doors, saying, vote for Bob Iger. That's nice. That's because Bob Iger's good at negotiating. He's good at getting friends. He must be a friendly guy. He must be trustworthy to people. So, yeah, if I met him in real life, yeah, I'd probably like him. But he's not the best guy. But he's a good guy. I don't think people should bash Bob Iger because you can hate him, but he's done a lot of incredible stuff. So there you have it. Actually, I went a little bit longer than I thought I would. So who needs Bruce and his stupid Rise of Sky? Here, I'll give you my Rise of Skywalker review. It sucked. I'm kidding. I didn't even see it, but I'm just saying, Bruce. Yeah. Here's a message I got from Bruce right now. Hi, Matt. Rise of Skywalker really sucked. Oh, what am I doing with my life? Accepting this new canon into it. Maybe I should rethink it and not sell death sticks. Okay, so that was Bruce's text message, totally authentic about his thoughts of the Rise of Skywalker. I'm really sorry about this. I really thought he was going to be on here. Maybe next time he'll be on here. Maybe next time we'll talk about Rise of Skywalker. Maybe next time we'll just talk more about Star Wars. Maybe next time we'll talk about, I don't know, Beanie Babies. Who knows? But we'll see you then on Princes of the Universe.